Alright, today we're going to cover the V82 Series ball valve. It is a true instrumentation ball valve. And the reason for that is simply because the ball and the stem is a one-piece component. In most ball valves, you have a stem and then you have a ball that is typically a floating ball. But with the V82 series, the ball and stem is one piece. Then you have a large Teflon packing that comes down over the top of the stem, and you have another half that mates with it that's already down in the bottom cavity of the body of the valve. And these two Teflon halves are supported with discs on the sides and with rings that line up with the orifice, so that when the valve's in the open position, you have flow. When it's in the off position, it's shut off. The disc supports this Teflon. Now, when this valve was first introduced into the market, DK-Lok introduced it as the 40 series valve, which matches up with our V82. The V82 has a temperature rating of positive 50 degrees Fahrenheit to positive 150 degrees Fahrenheit. And one of the problems with this particular valve over the years has always been cold environments. When it's been inside a panel or a cabinet and protected from the cold temperature, it's typically performed okay. But anytime it has typically seen temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, you typically have stem leakage. One of the other reasons that contributes to the stem leakage is this valve comes from the factory set at 1,000 psi. Even though the working pressure of the valve in one body size is 3,000 and another body size is 2,500, the factory sets it at 1,000, and this has typically been standard for everybody. So if you have a customer that's operating at pressures higher than 1,000 psi, they need to adjust the stem packing in the valve and tighten it down. Okay? Any questions about any of that? All right. We also offer the VL82 series, which has a lower temperature rating of minus 65 degrees Fahrenheit to help eliminate this problem. Okay? DK-Lok developed the 40T series, which coincides with the VL82. All right? The reason they did that is Parker introduced their MB series, which is the same type of valve, but they use a different internal packing and seat design with PFA rather than PTFE. And Parker was able to have a temperature rating of minus 65 degrees Fahrenheit to 300 degrees Fahrenheit on the high side. So they had a wide temperature range. DK-Lok was very concerned about that because this type of valve is our number 2 seller behind tube fittings. We sell more V82 than we do anything else because it is an instrumentation type valve. It's used in analytical research, mainly instrument air and things of that nature. So DK now has the VG82 series, which has the minus 65 degrees Fahrenheit to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which matches up with the 40G series from DK-Lok and the MB series from Parker. As I order inventory for our stock, I'm depleting the V82 and the VL82 material from our shelf, and eventually the VG82 will be the only series of this valve that we carry. So there'll be no questions when we get a competitive part number in as to whether or not we're matching up the correct valve from our product offering. Because if we sell somebody, if we cross over a 40 series part number, for instance an SS-43GS6, which is 3/8 tube compression, if we sell them the V82, and they go and install it in their application, and their temperature for their application is below 50 or above 150, they'll have performance issues with that valve. So once we get standardized on the VG82, we won't have to be concerned with that. Okay? Any questions so far? The valve's available in brass and stainless steel as standard, and that's pretty much the only two materials it comes in. As far as end connections, in compression, it's available from 1/8 inch tube to 3/4 inch tube compression. And in pipe, it's available in 1/8 inch female NPT to 1/2 inch female NPT. And we also could provide the valve in male NPT ends, although that's somewhat limited and very rare. We can put other end connections on this valve, which would be a male VCR type style, which is a semiconductor type end connection that seals on a gasket between two halves. There would be another adapter half that would mate up with the end connection on the valve, and a nut would screw onto the male VCR of the valve and squeeze two male ends onto the gasket, kind of like a pipe flange. Okay, we can also put male JIC ends on the valve if we need to. The configurations that the valve is available in is a two-way, which is standard, in a straight or angle design, and I think we have a sample of both of those on the table. We have a three-way switching, and because of this ball stem configuration right here, there are no directional requirements for the valve. You can flow through the bottom with supply and out either side on the runs and switch between them, or you can have two different sources of supply, one coming in this run, one coming in this run with a common outlet, and you can switch between the sources of supply. With a floating ball design, you can't do that. You always have to supply through the bottom port of the valve and switch between the outlets. Okay? We also have a four-way design, and if you look on the back page of the literature, you'll see the porting right up at the top of the V824. I'll give you a little example of how that works. I've drawn a diagram here of the valve itself with the porting. You've got the A port, which we'll use as supply. You've got the C port, which we'll use as the vent. And then the B and D port will be used in the switching process. Okay? So in one position, we're supplying through the A port and out the D port to this hydraulic cylinder or pneumatic cylinder. And this will cause the cylinder to move in this direction. Okay? Any pressure that's on the top of the cylinder will go back to the B port and will vent out port C. When we quarter turn the valve, it'll cause us to change dance partners in the valve. And we will now be supplying from A to B, which will cause the cylinder to go back in this direction, and any pressure that was in this line will come back through port D and vent out port C. So in one position, you've got A and B partnered and C and D partnered, 90 degrees rotation, you'll partner A and D and B and C. Okay, and that causes this cylinder to go up and down based on how frequently you actuate this. This valve can also have a pneumatic actuator on it, so you can pneumatically operate this valve with a 90-degree stroke. Okay? And then, of course, we have a five-way valve configuration where you just have one bottom port with four different outlets, and you just turn in 90-degree quarter turn increments to select the port that you want to supply out of the body of the valve. And that pretty much covers the configurations. This valve can also be pneumatically actuated with 90-degree spring return or double acting actuators, or we can put a 180-degree actuator on the three-way, and we can pneumatically switch on the three-way valve. A lot of times in analytical applications in the smaller valve, like the quarter-inch, they'll dual mount two of these per actuator, put one on the top and one on the bottom, and actuate two valves with one actuator. Okay? Any other questions?
Is the new valve going to be dimensionally the same? I mean, dimensionally the same?
Oh, everything's the same. The only difference will be what takes place inside the valve as far as accomplishing these temperature changes. Pressure capabilities, dimensions, end connections, configurations, everything will be the same.
Is Sledge-Lok discontinuing their 40 series and just going with the 40G?
This is their standard thing.
Okay, just like we're going to do.
But now, once again, one thing I didn't mention in the first class, all of this change in temperature only applies to the A and B body sizes. The C body from Sledge-Lok and from DK and everybody else is still this temperature range, and the D body is still this temperature range, because the bigger the valve, the larger that big hunk of Teflon gets, and there's just no way to get this same temperature range into bigger body valves. So this is only available in the A and B sizes.